This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze, the journey through life. You know, that journey through life, you can hit some stumbling blocks. And if you don't, you're not being real truthful, because nobody just walks down the path and glides, to the other end. My guest today is Craig Cook. And Craig, when I looked at your bio, um, you've had some challenges along the way, and yet today you are at a point where you're helping others with their challenges. So give us a little bit of background.
Sure, sure. So, from a career standpoint, I started my own company when I was 25. It was actually a digital first marketing company way back in the 20th century in 1996. Yeah, that's how long ago it was. It's way before like buzzwords like digital transformation and digital first, all that stuff that's around today, whatever existed. But that's the type of work we were doing.
Sure.
So started with very little resources, just $1,300 and a computer. Myself and a couple friends, college friends of mine. I was just out of school like a couple of years, and it was a really long struggle to get that company going. And it was interesting. And throughout the years, throughout the journey, you know, witnessed all kinds of major events. Like there was the dot-com bubble and crash. We were in that industry, so it
Right.
was interesting. Then there was 9/11, and the economic hit that came right after that. And then the 2008 Great Recession, whatever you want to call it, right? And actually sold the company in 2019, but I stayed on as CEO for 3 subsequent years. So in 2020, of course, as we know, the lockdown pandemic happened, um, and that was interesting. So through this journey, have really had my own personal struggles, but also there's been these major world struggles as well to navigate. And it's been an interesting ride, but I'm very blessed and grateful for where I'm at today.
And just listening to the things that happened that had nothing to do with you or your partners, okay? Life happening in the world.
Mhm.
Up until year 2000, I believe it was, my husband and I, we had a consulting business in the IT world, and we were doing extremely well.
Mhm.
And, we helped companies get prepared for year 2000, because we thought everything was going to crash.
Right.
And year 2000 didn't crash, but the world started crashing soon after that. And
Yes.
the technology just changed drastically and continues to change. Um, just when I think I know everything I need to know about my computer system and what's going on in the world, I find I'm behind the eight ball. But one of the things it sounds like you went through was, okay, there are these struggles, but we're gonna find our way through it, because what else is there to do?
That's right. You have to adapt. It's either adapt or perish, and that wasn't really an option in my mind. I was just all in, and there was no turning back. And even our business model, when we first started in '96, we were marketing independent music online, and we had this really neat idea, way ahead of its time, where people could come to this website, rhythmnet.com, it was called, and people could discover independent music from all these independent bands and
Right.
artists. And that back then, all the music people encountered was through the radio or MTV, just top-down programming. So this was meant to level the playing field for the independent artist and allow people to discover great music from great people. And people could find these artists and then download song samples and then buy their CDs through a secure server way back in 1996. But there was no broadband. There was only 30 million people worldwide online at the time. There wasn't even MP3s. So there really wasn't a digital audio standard. And everyone was afraid to buy things online at that time with
Right.
their credit card. So, we struggled with that model for a couple of years, and we didn't have funding, and we didn't go to venture capital or anything like that. We were young, and we didn't know what we were doing really. I was just making a bunch of mistakes, and but interesting. It all worked out the way it should have, and at least I like to think that. But after a couple of years, we adapted in 1998 and really started doing websites for companies because we kept getting those requests from people. Oh, build a website for our company. You guys know this stuff. And at that point, I was like, hey, let's switch gears. We can actually make good money for our time. And we kept the music project going on the side and then started focusing on that. And then I saw a vision for what a modern marketing agency would look like in the 21st century that would combine online and offline in an integrated fashion. So we started picking up capabilities along those lines and just kept developing and developing, and then reposition ourselves a few times in the marketplace to eventually work with medium to large enterprise companies.
It's interesting. Earlier this morning, I was talking to a woman who started her own PR firm, and basically in the same time frame that you were getting started. And one of the things she said too was that she had to realize she had to be open to all the changes that were going to be happening, even though she didn't know what they were going to be. She just knew that, hey, we're talking about the World Wide Web, which we hadn't talked about 10 years earlier. This is going to grow. And sadly, there are people out there today who are sort of destroying the World Wide Web. They're making it more difficult for those who want to use it properly.
Right.
And that happened in the music industry. I mean, we saw all that happen. In fact, my brother happens to be a producer of music, and there are certain places that he will not go listen to my podcast on because of where it goes. And
yeah.
So it's created a great avenue for the smaller artists because they're getting known, they're getting able to do the things that would have cost them millions of dollars in the industry.
Yes.
But then again, it's hurting some of the others. So how did your business model change through the years? Because it had to. I mean,
Yes.
2024 is so much different than 1996.
It is. It is. So in 98, when we made that initial pivot, we were working with small businesses, really focused on websites. And then again, at that time, I saw this vision of what the future could look like and what it should be, and then just started building up those capabilities, like I mentioned. Now, in 2001, started really thinking on how to position ourselves in the marketplace. And I thought, you know what, there's three pillars that we need: strategy, design, and technology. Because at the time, a lot of the traditional agencies were really great with creative and had solid strategy skills, but they just were awful with technology. They just didn't get it. It was super hard for them to implement and adopt. And on the other side, digital agencies were really great with technology. Obviously, some of them had really great creative as well, but there was no strategy. It was just like, what's the shiny object? What's the trick of the day type of thing.
Right.
And in a modern 21st century business environment that's driven by technology, really determined that those three pillars of strategy, design, and technology were essential for long-term success. So that was our underlying philosophy. And then around that, just started kind of working on the brand. In 2004, we repositioned ourselves as Rhythm Interactive and really started going after bigger companies. We had started getting some bigger companies and saw like, wow, we can actually get paid for all the different things that we've learned how to do and get paid for our time properly and fairly. Small businesses are great because we were a small business, but it was a challenge to get compensated fairly for the amount of time and our capabilities. When we got into starting to deal with larger companies, it was more manageable for a number of reasons. So we repositioned ourselves, rebranded, and went to the market with all this new marketing messages, and we just started to gain traction. And around 2012, uh, up to that point, we were really under the radar quite a bit because we were subcontracted by a lot of other agencies. And we determined that, that's great, it's great business, but we could be more profitable if we make direct relationships with these bigger companies. So we really started to make an awareness play, really stepped up the marketing effort through a content marketing approach, and really drove awareness, especially locally in our area in Southern California. And it worked really well. That's when we hit a really strong growth stride, rebranded again, just a rhythm, and some updated language. And we ended up being on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing private companies in the country 5 years in a row, which only 7% of companies at the time achieved that.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's really neat. So we hit this great growth stride. And that's where we really came into our own, and everything was like really moving. And then the opportunity came to, like, it's time to sell after all those things that we've been through, and just had a feeling something else was coming, didn't know what it was. And we sold in 2019, just in time. But even so, even with 2020, we weathered that well, really well, actually. And the company's still going strong today. I left 2 years ago to start a whole new chapter in life after 26 years of running the company. I equate each year to a mile. So I ran a marathon, and
Wow.
it's time for a new race.
And, and you are the individual that so many people claim they can't be, but I want people to know they can be, because
That's right.
it just takes wanting to do it.
Yes.
And I'm sure you were afraid at times,
Oh, yes.
the same way I was when I was sort of booted out of corporate America, and I came home and I said, now what? And, rebranded myself and said, this is what I can do, but this is what I really want to do. And for the first year, I was scared because I had to get out there and prove to people that, yes, I was going to be a podcaster. I was going to be in for the long haul. And I had somebody the other day say to me, you've been doing it over 10 years. Are you bored? And I said, no, because every person, even though their story may be similar, they give me that encouragement. And I'm hoping that they're giving our listeners that same encouragement, because
That's a great story.
yeah. And after 26 years, it still had to have been tough for you to say, I'm going to step away.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. And yeah, your story is really great. Congratulations, by the way, 10 years. I mean, most companies and people that set out on their endeavors, they don't make it 5 years, right? 95% just don't make it. It's just the way it is. And then to make it that 10-year mark, I just heard this the other day. I'm not sure if it's correct, but probably is, like another 95% of those don't make it to the 10-year mark.
Right.
So big congratulations to you. And I resonate with what you're saying, like that fear that can creep into all of us because we're having to prove our value, that we actually bring value to the table to others. And that can be a scary proposition at times. And a lot of self-doubt can kick in. All the negative self-talk that can come in all its variety of forms can creep in at any given moment. And that's the biggest competitor we face, is ourselves. And that's what I write about in my book.
It's interesting because just before all this happened, my son was, he needed an internship for college, and his love is sports, and he wanted to be in sports. And he messed up on a sports interview. He was never one to be on time, and so he wasn't on time, and it all fell through. But he got a job, an internship working at a internet radio station. And I was so jealous of him because my background is broadcasting, and it was like, this is what I want to do, and you're doing it. So I went to the company and I said, I have an idea for a podcast. I had no idea. No, I mean, I knew what I wanted to do, but I had no idea how to do it. And they said, okay, you can start Tuesday. We'll give you the 2 o'clock slot.
Wow.
And I went in and I arranged with a friend of mine who was working for the Red Cross. I said, will you be my guest? And he used to be a DJ. And so I came up with, tell me your journey. How did you, number one, become a DJ? How did you do it all those years? And now you're working in the Red Cross. What is the connection?
Yeah.
And it was after that show, I turned to them gloating and saying, see what I can do? And they said, oh, are you proving us or are you proving it to yourself? And I was proving it to myself.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that all podcasts have been great, because they haven't. And, we all
Yeah.
make mistakes along the way.
That's
But
right.
my message is very similar to yours, is if it's something you want, go for it.
Yes.
Got to take the steps. So you decided to write a book. Was it
Yeah.
anywhere on your radar years before that you were going to write a book?
Yes, it actually took me 12 years to get it done. I started in 2011, and then I released it just at the end of 2023. Yeah, no, mid-November. So 12 long years to get it done, but I stuck with it and eventually got it done. But actually, the idea first came to mind when I was a teenager, probably around 17 or so, that I would like to write a book one day. I just didn't know on what. Because books were my first passion in life.
Okay.
As soon as I could read, I was always reading. Always had a book in my face everywhere I went. So yeah. So here we are, and it's funny because now I'm having to relive my book again. I'm writing about, and it's interesting because now I'm an independent author where I'm on that independent scene, just in a different form of artistry, where in 1996 it was independent music, right? So
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
full circle. It's interesting.
So tell us a little bit about the book, because I'm sure the book is going to be helpful to many of us.
Sure, thank you so much. So the book is titled Business Kung Fu. And the concept of the book, why it's called that, is I studied Chinese Kung Fu really intently from the age of 17 to 25. I still study today, but those were like my core years. And when I started my company at 25, I just went all in and really was massively focused on that. So much so that I kind of left everything else to the side. And we can get to how that's not a good thing to do. But the concept of the book is how I took the principles that I learned from Chinese Kung Fu and applied it to running the company in the terms of mindset, how I went about day-to-day operations, discipline, just a multitude of principles and lessons that I learned. And so the book is, throughout the entire book, it has all these parallels and in chapter 1, it's all about building a foundation. And I have a model called the 5 elements of entrepreneurial success that's based on Chinese 5-element theory. And 5-element theory, it's all about balance of the elements, and it's fire and earth, water, metal, and wood. And the 5 elements that I identified for entrepreneurial success are passion, which leads to discipline, which leads to expertise, which then leads to confidence, and then leads to faith. And there's a generative cycle where the potential of these elements increases and gets fulfilled, but then through a destructive cycle, it could diminish just based on our mindset. And then these elements have interrelationships with each other that can have positive or negative impacts. And it's really about our mindset. And life is interesting, and we've talked about a lot of different events, and there's personal events and world events that can throw us off balance. But
Right.
how do you get back to balance and get centered and maintain that is super important. So that's something that a lot of people have resonated with and really like in the book. It's in the first chapter, which people can get for free actually at my website, csquaredpro.io. And of course, if they like it, the book's on Amazon for purchase. But yeah, it's at its core, it's a mindset book geared towards entrepreneurs because it's in an entrepreneurial context, to help them overcome the challenges that they'll face on their journey.
Well,
But it can be applied
yeah.
to all kinds of areas in life.
Well, and that's what I'm hearing, you know, it
Mhm.
reminded me of a phone call I got, in between my morning podcast and this one. My husband called and he was scheduled for a minor surgical plan at the end of this month. And he's been looking forward to it. Let's get it over with. And he calls me and he says, okay, we're not doing it this day, but we're doing it almost 2 months from now. Which sort of, I looked at my calendar and it was like, oh, I have to change all this stuff around. And my first reaction was I was not being mindful of what
Mhm.
he needed.
Yeah.
And I made it into this big thing. And I found myself stopping. And I said, okay, I'm going to take a breath. Okay, I'm going to have to move some things around. That's what life is all about. And you know
Yeah.
what? It's not going to kill me to do that. Although at the moment, as he's telling me on the phone, it was like, you just disrupted my whole week. You know, how can you do that?
Yeah.
But those things happen to us on a daily basis. And if we can catch ourselves and realize that, you know what, just do what you need to do, you know, pivot, like you said, and things are going to work out. But if you sit there, you know, and just want to face what you're creating as a disaster, you're not going to get anywhere. And that's the old Karen, but every once in a while, she shows up again.
Yeah, it happens to all of us. Life is just so interesting with so many different circumstances, with different relationships that we have, people, places, things. It could all knock us out of balance. You know, we're human and it just happens. So, you know, how quickly can we adapt and, you know, get back to center and stay balanced is really the key. So, yeah, that's a great example.
Well, and I try to, you know, remind myself and my clients, you know, when we're complaining about the fact that the rain ruined my day today because of I was planning to be outside, or a client didn't show up, or whatever that is, you know, I have to remind myself of other things that are really more disastrous and say to
Mhm.
myself, okay, this I can fix.
Yes.
That I couldn't, okay? And that's not even for me to deal with. So pull myself away, fix what I can, and move forward. And it sounds like that's what you're talking about in your book. And, you know,
Absolutely. That's another great way of phrasing it. There's actually a training method, through my instructor's instructor ended up starting his own system, martial arts system that was all encompassing and very open to any sort of art. Really neat. And he developed this training method called SCRAW, which stands for Spontaneous Creative Rhythmic Adaptation Method. SCRAW method. So like what you're talking about, you know, when these things happen, you know, they're spontaneous, right? So when these spontaneous events happen, how can you apply your creative mind to change that rhythm in order to adapt to the situation? And then you can overcome. Otherwise, you get too emotional and get all wrapped up in your emotions and spun out in the mind. You just kind of you get stagnant, you get frozen, you just you're not thinking properly, you just kind of cycle in this downward spiral, and it just doesn't help not only yourself but whoever else is in the picture.
well, exactly. And I realized that when I was spiraling this morning with this phone call, it was like, okay, just take a deep breath, because he's already probably disappointed himself. I'm making it worse by, you know, oh, my
Mhm.
calendar. And
Yeah.
I actually called him back afterwards and I said, I got everything straightened out. How are you doing with it? And he said, well, you know, I'm disappointed, but you know what? It happens. And so the two of us, you know, we realize you got to pivot. And if you don't, you're right. You're going to be stuck
Yeah.
and you're not going to be able to take the next step. So, Well, how
Yeah.
can we find your book? You said it's on Amazon, but you also have a website, correct?
Yes, my website is c-squaredpro.io. So that's the letter C and then squared spelled out pro, c-squaredpro.io. And then there's up in the navigation menu, there's books, and you can find it on that page with the download for the first chapter for free. And then there's a link over to Amazon. If you Google it or go directly to Amazon and just search for it, it'll pop right up there at the top. I plan on releasing it to some other channels here. I want to do an audio book as well because a lot of people have been asking me to do an audio book. Just one step at a time. There's so much to do. It's a whole new world for me. Even with my background in marketing, it's a whole new world. So there's a lot of things I'm learning, a lot of things to do. And I actually just won a couple of awards just in the past 2 weeks for the book. I received from the Independent Reader Discovery Awards, best self-help book, so top in the category, which is really neat. And then from the oh my gosh, it's the Independent Reader. All these names, they're so similar, right? But another independent reader awards platform, and I'm a finalist in the business category and also best overall design. Coming from my background as from a creative industry too, one of the things that I wanted with the book is to create an experience of reading the book so that it wasn't just like your standard average business book. So I went full color
Okay.
on the inside, which when the people that helped me publish it, the publishing company that I'm under, they're like, why do you want to do that? Are you sure you want to do that? It's going to increase the expense of the book. And I was like, that's the 5-element model. It's like, I want it to be an experience. I want, that's what I did for a living is develop experiences, and they had to provide value. So, I just wanted to provide the most value that I could with it. So,
color draws our eye. So
yes.
black and white diagram we may look at and we may comprehend it. Something in color, we're going to be drawn to it and wonder, should we actually be looking at it and what's in it? So I totally agree. I think that is because I read so many self-help books, and I read them, but I will tell you, if they were, if I could listen to them instead, it'd be much better for me, because I tire reading and I start thinking ahead of what I'm reading. But if I'm listening to a book, if I'm not sure where it's going, I will stop it and think about it and start it up again. So it's a great adventure.
Yeah, thank you. Just more validation for me that I need to do that. So everyone, we're so busy with our lives too. I think a lot of people in the car when they're on their way to work, or driving just in general, because that's when they have their time to just be on their own. They listen to audiobooks quite a bit. That's what I've been hearing. So it's just another one of the to-do items on my list.
Well, that is wonderful. Well, we're going to have all this information in our show notes, so there's no reason why they can't follow you, find your books. And I'm going to be contacting you because I have another podcaster who's part of our group. She does a program on how to super age, and a lot of her practices are from Chinese medicine. And I think your book and what she talks about are going to fit perfectly.
Oh, absolutely. Because actually, the funny thing is, I'm in a doctorate program for Chinese energy medicine right now. So we probably have a lot to talk about.
That would be absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to send her your information, and that way our listeners can get a double dose of you. I think that's wonderful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well, have a wonderful day, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Karen.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.